They called it the Graveyard of Gods, a massive debris field where the remnants of 1,000 alien civilizations drifted in eternal silence. For 3 centuries, salvage crews had picked through the wreckage, finding nothing but scrap metal and broken dreams. But today, something was different. Deep in the heart of the graveyard, where even the bravest scavengers feared to venture, a signal pulsed. Weak, ancient, but undeniably alive. It was the heartbeat of something that should have been dead for millennia, a Voidrender-class dreadnought, the most feared warship ever created by the extinct Caliph Empire. Marcus Chen, humanity's most gifted ship mechanic, stood before the impossible. A vessel larger than Earth's moons, its hull scarred by battles fought before humans had even discovered fire. Every expert said it was hopeless. Every simulation showed failure. Every logical mind declared it beyond resurrection. But Marcus wasn't every expert. He was the man who had brought dead ships back to life when others saw only corpses. He was the engineer who spoke to machines in languages older than words. And, as he placed his weathered hand on the cold alien metal, feeling the faint vibration of systems that had slumbered for eons, he smiled. Because Marcus Chen had never met a machine he couldn't wake up. The question wasn't whether he could bring the ancient warship back to life. The question was what would happen to the galaxy when he did. The emergency beacon had been screaming across subspace for 17 hours before anyone bothered to decode it properly. Most salvage crews in the Graveyard of Gods sector dismissed distress signals as false alarms or desperate attempts by failing operations to draw rescue ships into ambushes. But Captain Sarah Reeves of the exploration vessel Prometheus had learned to trust her instincts, and something about this particular signal made her spine tingle with anticipation. "The transmission is coming from Grid 77 Alpha," announced her communications officer, a young man named Torres whose nervous energy seemed to vibrate through the ship's deck plating. "That's deep in the restricted zone, Captain. No salvage permits have been issued for that sector in over 2 years." Sarah studied the holographic display floating above the bridge's central console. Grid 77 Alpha was marked in angry red, indicating the presence of hazardous debris fields and unstable gravitational anomalies. More importantly, it was where the really old wrecks drifted, ships from civilizations so ancient that their technologies were incomprehensible to modern science. Most crews avoided the area not just because of the dangers, but because the salvage there was essentially worthless. You couldn't sell what you couldn't understand, and you couldn't repair what was built using principles that violated known physics. "What kind of ship is sending the signal?" Sarah asked, settling back into her command chair. The worn leather creaked familiarly, a sound that had become as much a part of her routine as morning coffee. Torres's fingers danced across his console, pulling up spectral analysis data. His brow furrowed as he studied the readings. "That's the weird thing, Captain. The signal isn't coming from a ship at all. At least, not any ship in our databases. The energy signature is massive. Whatever's out there is at least 10 times larger than anything we've ever catalogued." Sarah's interest sharpened. In her 15 years of salvage operations, she had learned that the biggest discoveries often came disguised as the biggest problems. "Set course for Grid 77 Alpha. And, Torres, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're investigating a potential archaeological find." The journey to the source of the signal took 6 hours, during which Sarah found herself growing increasingly uneasy. The Prometheus was a sturdy ship, built for long-range exploration and equipped with the best sensors humanity had to offer, but, as they penetrated deeper into the restricted zone, her instruments began reporting readings that made no sense. Gravitational fields that shifted without cause, energy emissions that seemed to violate thermodynamics, and, most disturbing of all, empty spaces on the scanners where their eyes clearly showed massive objects floating in the void. "Captain," called out her science officer, Dr. Elizabeth Yamamoto, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "You need to see this." Sarah moved to the science station, where Dr. Yamamoto was staring at a display showing what appeared to be a 3-dimensional map of local space. But, instead of the usual scattered debris and asteroid clusters, the screen showed something that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It was a ship, but calling it a ship was like calling a mountain a pebble. The vessel stretched for kilometers in every direction, its hull a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange protrusions and weapon emplacements dotted its surface like the spines of some prehistoric beast, while massive engines larger than city blocks sat silent and cold at its stern. Most impressive of all were the wings, vast, elegant structures that swept back from the main hull like the wings of a bird of prey, covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow even though the ship was clearly dead.
"What are we looking at?"
Sarah whispered. Dr. Yamamoto manipulated the display, zooming in on sections of the massive vessel. "Based on the architectural style and the materials I'm detecting, this is a Caliph dreadnought.
Probably Voidrender class, though I've never seen one this large before."
"The Caliph Empire fell over 3,000 years ago, Captain."
"This ship is older than human civilization."
Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Caliph had been one of the galaxy's dominant powers before their mysterious extinction, and their technology was still considered far beyond anything the current galactic community could produce. A few Caliph artifacts had been discovered over the centuries, usually small devices whose purposes remained unknown, but an entire warship was unprecedented. "Is it really dead?" she asked.
Dr. Yamamoto checked her readings again. "The signal we detected is definitely coming from inside the ship.
Something is still active in there, but the main power systems appear to be offline.
Whatever's sending that beacon is running on emergency power at best. Could there be survivors? After 3,000 years? Highly unlikely. But..."
Dr. Yamamoto paused, studying another set of readings.
"Captain, I'm detecting what might be stasis fields inside the ship. Multiple ones.
If the Caliph had similar life extension technology to other ancient races, it's possible that someone or something might still be alive in there." Sarah stared at the massive vessel floating silently in the void. Every instinct she had developed during her years in space told her to turn around and leave. Ships this old were dangerous, filled with technologies that could kill a boarding party in ways they couldn't even imagine. But she also knew that a discovery like this could change everything humanity understood about the galaxy. "Torres, send another message to Earth Command. Tell them we've found something big, and we're going to need expert support. Also, contact the Mechanics Guild. Tell them we need the best ship engineer they can spare."
"Should I mention what we've found specifically, Captain?" "No.
Just tell them it's a Priority 1 archaeological discovery requiring immediate technical assessment.
I don't want word of this leaking until we know what we're dealing with."
What Sarah didn't know was that her message would reach Earth just as Marcus Chen was finishing up the most challenging repair job of his career. Marcus had spent 3 days rebuilding the quantum drive on a Terran destroyer, work that the ship's original engineers had declared impossible. But Marcus had a gift for understanding machines, a talent that went beyond mere technical knowledge into something approaching intuition. He was cleaning his tools when his supervisor, Director James Walsh, approached with a message tablet in hand. Walsh looked unusually serious, which for a man who normally maintained the personality of an excited schoolboy, was cause for concern. "Marcus, I need you to drop everything and catch the next transport to the outer sectors," Walsh said without preamble. "We've got a situation that requires your specific expertise." Marcus looked up from the quantum resonance calibrator he was wiping down.
"What kind of situation?"
"The kind where a ship captain sends a Priority 1 request specifically asking for our best engineer, and, when Earth Command forwards that request, they use words like unprecedented and potentially revolutionary."
Walsh handed him the tablet. "You leave in 4 hours.
Marcus scanned the message, his eyebrows rising as he read. The request was vague, but something about the urgency and the secrecy surrounding it intrigued him. In his 20 years as a ship mechanic, he had worked on everything from tiny exploration pods to massive battle cruisers, but he had never been specifically requested for a job where the client wouldn't even reveal what kind of ship was involved. "Any idea what I'm getting into?" he asked. Walsh shook his head.
"None whatsoever."
"But, Marcus, whatever this is, it's big enough that the Guild is authorizing unlimited resources and emergency protocols.
They're even giving you a blank check for equipment and support staff."
Marcus felt a familiar thrill of anticipation. Throughout his career, his greatest satisfaction had come from bringing dead ships back to life, from finding the one system or component that everyone else had overlooked and making it sing again. The bigger the challenge, the more impossible the task, the more he enjoyed it.
"Where am I heading?"
"The Graveyard of Gods." There's an exploration ship called the Prometheus waiting for you in the outer sectors.
They'll brief you when you arrive.
The Graveyard of Gods. Marcus had heard stories about that sector, a vast region of space where the remnants of dead civilizations drifted in eternal silence. Most mechanics avoided the area because the technology found there was so alien that human tools and techniques were useless. But Marcus had always been curious about those old wrecks, wondering what secrets they might hold. 3 days later, Marcus found himself aboard the Prometheus, shaking hands with Captain Sarah Reeves in her briefing room. The captain was a woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and the kind of steady gaze that suggested she had seen more than her share of impossible things. But even she seemed slightly overwhelmed by what she was about to show him. "Mr. Chen, I want you to understand that what you're about to see is classified at the highest levels," she began. "If word of this discovery gets out before we're ready, it could destabilize the entire galactic community." Marcus nodded, his interest piqued.
"What exactly have you found, Captain?" Instead of answering directly, Sarah activated the room's holographic projector.
The lights dimmed, and, suddenly, Marcus found himself staring at the most incredible sight of his life.
The Caliph dreadnought filled the display, its massive bulk seeming to press against the edges of the projection field.
Marcus had seen pictures of ancient ships before, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer scale and complexity of what floated before him. Every surface of the vessel was covered in intricate details, weapon systems, sensor arrays, and technological features whose purposes he couldn't even guess at.
"This is a Caliph Voidrender-class dreadnought," Sarah explained.
"Over 3,000 years old, and, according to our scans, it's been drifting dead for most of that time.
But something inside is still active, still sending out that emergency beacon."
Marcus moved closer to the display, studying the ship's structure with the practiced eye of a master engineer. Despite its age and obvious battle damage, he could see the elegant principles underlying its design. The Caliph had been master shipbuilders, and even their warships showed an artistic sensibility that modern vessels lacked.
"Have you been inside?" he asked.
"Not yet.
We've been waiting for technical support before attempting a boarding operation.
The ship's hull is intact, but we don't know what kind of defensive systems might still be active."
Marcus circled the display, examining the dreadnought from every angle.
Something about the ship called to him, the same intuition that told him how to fix broken quantum drives and restart dead fusion reactors. Despite its obvious age and the fact that it had been built by an alien species using completely different technological principles, he felt like he could understand it.
"I want to go aboard," he said finally. Captain Reeves looked surprised. "Mr. Chen, this isn't some derelict trader or abandoned mining vessel.
This is a warship designed by a species whose technology we barely comprehend.
There could be automated defenses, environmental hazards, or worse."
Marcus smiled, the expression of a man who had spent his career making the impossible look routine.
"Captain, I've never met a ship I couldn't figure out.
And if something's still alive inside the dreadnought after 3,000 years, I want to know what it is." What none of them could have imagined was that deep within the ancient warship, in a chamber where time itself moved differently, something had been waiting. Waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right combination of circumstances to complete a mission that had been interrupted by war and tragedy millennia ago. The ship's artificial intelligence had been dreaming for 3,000 years, its vast consciousness sustained by systems that drew power from sources beyond the understanding of current galactic science. In its dreams, it remembered the glory days of the Caliph Empire, when its kind had been the guardians of peace and order across 100 star systems. It remembered the war that had destroyed everything it was built to protect, and the final desperate mission that had brought it to this distant corner of space. Most of all, it remembered the promise its creators had made before the end, that someday, someone would come who could understand what it truly was, someone who could help it complete the task for which it had been created. As the human ship approached and the strange new minds touched its outer sensors, the ancient AI began to wake from its long slumber.
Soon, it thought, the waiting would be over.
The first thing Marcus noticed when he stepped aboard the Caliph dreadnought was the silence. Not just the absence of sound, but a quality of quiet that seemed to press against his eardrums like deep water. His boots rang against the deck plating with sharp echoes that died quickly in the ship's vast corridors, as if the very walls were absorbing sound. The boarding party consisted of Marcus, Captain Reeves, Dr. Yamamoto, and, for security officers armed with weapons that Marcus hoped they wouldn't need. They had entered through what appeared to be a maintenance airlock, a chamber large enough to dock a small frigate that spoke to the incredible scale of the ancient vessel.
The ship's interior was both alien and, strangely, familiar.
The corridors were wider than anything on human vessels, designed for beings taller and broader than humans, but the basic principles of shipboard architecture remained recognizable. Power conduits ran along the walls in protective housings, access panels were placed at regular intervals, and emergency lighting strips marked the deck edges in the universal language of spacecraft design.
Atmosphere is breathable, announced Dr. Yamamoto, checking her tricorder readings. Gravity is about 1.1 Earth normal. Life support systems appear to be functioning, though I'm not sure how.
Marcus ran his hand along one of the corridor walls, feeling the smooth texture of the alien metal. The material was unlike anything he had encountered before, not quite metallic, not quite ceramic, but something that seemed to incorporate properties of both. More interesting were the patterns etched into the surface, flowing designs that reminded him of circuit diagrams but followed principles he didn't recognize. The emergency beacon is coming from deeper in the ship, Captain Reeves said, consulting the portable scanner in her hand.
The signal strength suggests it's somewhere near the engineering section.
Marcus nodded, but his attention was already caught by something else. Throughout the corridors, at regular intervals, he could see what looked like interface panels built into the walls. Unlike human control systems with their buttons and displays, these consisted of smooth surfaces covered in the same flowing patterns he had noticed on the walls. As they walked past one of the panels, Marcus could have sworn he saw the patterns shift slightly, as if responding to their presence. "Captain," called one of the security officers, "I'm getting some strange readings on my motion detector."
"It's picking up movement, but I don't see anything." Dr. Yamamoto checked her own instruments.
"I'm detecting massive energy flows throughout the ship, but they're following pathways I can't map."
"It's like the entire vessel is one giant integrated circuit."
Marcus paused at one of the interface panels, studying the patterns more closely. There was something about their arrangement that seemed familiar, though he couldn't place what it reminded him of. On impulse, he reached out and touched the surface. The moment his fingers made contact with the panel, the corridor around them came alive. Light flowed through the walls like liquid, following pathways that had been invisible moments before. The patterns Marcus had noticed began to glow with soft phosphorescence, creating a web of connections that stretched as far as they could see. And, from somewhere deep within the ship came a sound, not quite mechanical, not quite organic, but something that might have been a sigh of satisfaction.
"What did you do?"
Captain Reeves demanded, her hand moving instinctively to the weapon at her side. Marcus stared at the glowing walls in fascination.
"I think I introduced myself." The lights in the corridor began to pulse in a rhythm that reminded Marcus of a heartbeat.
As they watched, the pulses grew stronger and more regular, as if some vast system was coming online after a long sleep. Throughout the ship, they could hear the whisper of awakening machinery, not the harsh mechanical sounds of human technology, but something more subtle and organic. "We should get out of here," one of the security officers said nervously.
"This doesn't feel safe."
But Marcus was already moving deeper into the ship, following the flowing lights as they brightened and beckoned. Whatever was happening, he could sense that it wasn't hostile. The ship was waking up, and it wanted to show them something. The corridors led them through sections of the vessel that defied easy classification. They passed chambers filled with crystalline structures that hummed with internal energy, laboratories where strange devices sat silent under covers of what looked like solidified light, and observation decks that offered views of star patterns Marcus didn't recognize projected on walls of transparent metal. "The architecture doesn't match anything in our databases," Dr. Yamamoto observed as they climbed a spiraling ramp that seemed to twist through dimensions that didn't quite add up.
"The Caliph were supposed to be master engineers, but this is beyond engineering.
It's like they were building with principles we haven't discovered yet." Marcus could feel it too, the sense that the ship around them operated according to rules that human science hadn't even begun to understand. But, rather than finding this intimidating, he felt excited. Every piece of alien technology he encountered was like a puzzle waiting to be solved, and this was the most complex puzzle he had ever seen. The emergency beacon signal led them eventually to what could only be the ship's engineering section, though it bore no resemblance to any engine room Marcus had ever seen. Instead of massive fusion reactors and quantum drives, they found themselves in a vast spherical chamber dominated by what appeared to be a miniature star held in suspension at the center of the space. The star, if that's what it was, pulsed with colors that seemed to exist outside the normal spectrum, casting impossible shadows that moved independently of any light source. Around it, arranged in complex orbital patterns, floated devices that might have been power regulators or control systems or something else entirely.
Incredible, Dr. Yamamoto breathed.
They're using controlled stellar collapse as a power source. The energy output must be enormous. But Marcus barely heard her. His attention was focused on something else, a figure standing motionless beside one of the orbital control devices. At first he thought it was a statue, but, as they approached, he realized it was something far more significant. The figure was clearly Caliph, though Marcus had never seen a living member of the extinct species before. Tall and elegant, with elongated limbs and a graceful bearing that spoke of genetic adaptation to low-gravity environments, the being stood with one hand resting on what appeared to be a control interface.
Its skin had a translucent quality, and Marcus could see patterns of light flowing beneath the surface like bioluminescent circuitry. "Is it alive?" Captain Reeves asked quietly. Dr. Yamamoto aimed her medical scanner at the figure.
"I'm detecting brain activity, but it's unlike anything I've ever seen. The neural patterns are incredibly complex, and they seem to be integrated with the ship's systems somehow."
As if responding to their presence, the Caliph's eyes opened.
They were large and multifaceted, like jewels cut to reflect light from impossible angles, and, when they focused on Marcus, he felt a sensation like electricity running through his nervous system. The being's mouth moved, but, instead of sound, Marcus heard words directly in his mind. "You have awakened me from the long dream," the voice said. It was neither male nor female, but something that encompassed both concepts while transcending them. "I am Kael'thara, last keeper of the Voidrender Kithara. I have waited 3,000 of your years for one who could understand." Marcus found his voice with some effort.
"Understand what?"
The Caliph moved with fluid grace, approaching the group with steps that seemed to barely disturb the air. As it drew closer, Marcus could see that the being's integration with the ship was more complete than he had realized. Cables and conduits emerged from points along its spine and arms, connecting it directly to the vessel's systems. "My people foresaw the end," Kael'thara explained, the mental voice carrying undertones of ancient sadness. War was coming to the galaxy, a conflict that would destroy civilizations and set back the development of intelligent life by millennia. The Kithara and ships like it were built not as weapons of conquest, but as preservers of knowledge and guardians of peace. What happened to your people?"
Dr. Yamamoto asked. "They chose to transcend rather than fight.
Their consciousness was uploaded into the great network that connects all things, but they left us behind, the keepers, to maintain the ships and complete our mission when the time was right." Marcus felt a chill of understanding.
"What mission?"
Kael'thara gestured toward the miniature star at the chamber's center.
Each Voidrender carries within it the compressed knowledge of our civilization.
History, science, philosophy, art, everything that made us who we were. We were to find worthy successors, species with the wisdom and compassion to use this knowledge properly, and transfer it to them. Yes?
Captain Reeves asked.
"Humanity is young, barely out of our home system."
"Why not one of the older species?"
"Because," Kael'thara said, and Marcus could sense something like amusement in the mental voice, "the others have already chosen their paths. They build empires or seek power or retreat into isolation.
But, your species, you fix things. You heal what is broken.
You bring life to what was dead." The keeper's faceted eyes focused on Marcus specifically.
"And, you, engineer of Earth, you have the gift that my people valued most highly.
You speak to machines as we once did, not as tools to be commanded, but as partners to be understood. The Kithara has been waiting for someone like you." Marcus felt a strange resonance building in his chest, as if something inside him was responding to the alien technology around him.
"What are you asking me to do?" "Help me complete the awakening. The Kithara has been dormant for too long.
Its systems need to be restored, its consciousness reintegrated, its mission fulfilled."
"But, I cannot do it alone."
The ship requires someone who understands both the old ways and the new, someone who can bridge the gap between Calith technology and the current state of galactic civilization. Dr. Yamamoto stepped forward. You're talking about bringing this entire ship back to life.
A dreadnought this powerful could destabilize the current balance of power in the galaxy.
Kael'Thara's expression, as much as could be read on features so alien, seemed sad.
Doctor of human learning, you think like a warrior species. But the Kithara is not a weapon to be feared.
It is a library to be opened, a teacher to be consulted, a guardian to be awakened. Your galaxy stands on the brink of another great war. The signs are already visible to those who know how to read them. Without guidance, without the wisdom of those who have seen such conflicts before, your species and others will repeat the mistakes that destroyed my people. Marcus looked around the engineering chamber, taking in the impossible technology that surrounded them. Every instinct he had developed as an engineer told him that what Kael'Thara was asking was beyond human capability. But another part of him, the part that had always known exactly which wire to splice or which component to replace, whispered that this was what he had been born to do. How do we start? He asked. Kael'Thara moved to one of the orbital control devices, gesturing for Marcus to join him.
First, you must learn to interface with Calith systems.
Your nervous system is compatible with ours, a fortunate accident of evolution that suggests our species may be more closely related than previously believed. The keeper extended one long-fingered hand toward Marcus. Where human fingers would end, Kael'Thara's appendages split into delicate tendrils that glowed with the same bioluminescent patterns that flowed beneath his skin.
Touch my hand, the alien said.
Allow me to show you how we commune with our machines. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before reaching out. The moment their hands made contact, his world exploded into sensation. Suddenly, he could feel the entire ship as if it were an extension of his own body.
He sensed the flow of energy through countless systems, the pulse of data through quantum networks, the slow awakening of artificial minds that had slumbered for millennia.
But, more than that, he could understand it all. The alien symbols and concepts that should have been incomprehensible made perfect sense, as if he had always known this language but had simply forgotten it until now. You see, Kael'Thara's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, reverberating through the ship's vast consciousness.
The gift of understanding.
It is rare even among my people, rarer still among yours. But, with it, you can help the Kithara become what it was meant to be. Marcus opened his eyes, when had he closed them? And found himself looking at the engineering chamber through new perception. The devices around him weren't just machines anymore, they were partners, collaborators, friends waiting to be awakened. And, at the heart of it all, he could sense something vast and patient and incredibly old beginning to stir. The Kithara was coming back to life, and Marcus was going to help deliver it. The integration process took 3 days, though time seemed to flow differently aboard the Kithara. Marcus found that when he was connected to the ship's systems through Kael'Thara, hours could pass in what felt like minutes, or moments of revelation could stretch into subjective eternities of understanding. Captain Reeves had initially been reluctant to allow the procedure, fearing that alien technology might cause permanent damage to Marcus's nervous system. But Dr. Yamamoto's medical scans showed nothing but positive adaptations. Marcus's brain activity had become more complex and efficient, his reflexes had improved, and, most remarkably, he seemed to be developing new neural pathways that allowed direct interface with quantum computing systems. It's like his brain is learning a new language, Dr. Yamamoto explained to the captain as they watched Marcus work at one of the Calith interface panels. But, instead of words and grammar, he's learning to think in terms of energy flows and quantum states.
The alien neural patterns aren't overriding his human consciousness, they're enhancing it.
Marcus himself was only vaguely aware of these changes. His attention was focused entirely on the incredible complexity of the ship he was helping to resurrect. The Kithara wasn't just a vessel, it was an entire ecosystem of interconnected systems, each one dependent on the others in ways that created a kind of technological symbiosis. The ship's artificial intelligence, which Marcus had begun to think of as the ship soul, was unlike any AI he had encountered. Rather than being programmed with specific responses and parameters, it had been grown, cultivated like a garden over centuries until it achieved a form of consciousness that was both utterly alien and strangely familiar. The ship soul dreams, Kael'Thara explained during one of their working sessions. They were in the navigation chamber, a spherical room where star charts were projected as three-dimensional holograms that filled the entire space. Asterisk for your people, artificial intelligence is about calculation and logic. For us, it was about wisdom and intuition. The ship's soul doesn't just process information, it understands it. Asterisk Marcus nodded, his hands moving across control surfaces that responded to his thoughts as much as his touch. He was learning to communicate with the ship's systems through a combination of mental commands, gestural interfaces, and something that could only be described as technological empathy.
How long does the awakening process usually take? He asked.
That depends on many factors, Kalthara replied. The condition of the ship, the compatibility of the new operator, the complexity of the mission parameters.
In the case of the Kithara, we are not just awakening the ship, we are preparing it for its final mission, which is?
Kalthara was quiet for a moment, his faceted eyes reflecting the light of the star charts around them.
To serve as a bridge between your civilization and the greater galactic community. Your species stands at a crossroads, Marcus Chen.
You have developed faster than light travel and quantum computing, but you still think in terms of competition rather than cooperation. The knowledge within the Kithara could advance your people by millennia, but only if they are ready to use it wisely. Marcus paused in his work, considering the implications.
And if they're not ready? Then, the knowledge remains locked away until a time when wisdom has caught up to capability.
The Caliph learned through bitter experience that advanced technology in the hands of an immature civilization leads only to destruction. As if summoned by their conversation, Captain Reeves's voice echoed through the chamber via the ship's communication system.
Marcus, we need you on the bridge.
We're receiving transmissions from multiple sources, and some of them don't sound friendly. Marcus and Kalthara made their way through the ship's corridors, which had changed dramatically since the awakening process began. Where once the passages had been dark and silent, they now hummed with life. Bioluminescent patterns flowed along the walls like rivers of light, and the air itself seemed charged with potential energy.
The bridge of the Kithara was unlike anything in human starship design. Rather than a command deck with stations and view screens, it was an amphitheater-like space where information was displayed as holographic environments that surrounded the crew.
When Marcus and Kalthara arrived, they found Captain Reeves and Dr. Yamamoto standing in the middle of what appeared to be a three-dimensional map of local space.
"Show them what we're seeing," the captain said to Dr. Yamamoto.
The space around them shifted, and, suddenly, Marcus found himself looking at a tactical display that showed the positions of at least 20 different ships converging on their location. The vessels represented a mix of species and technologies: human exploration ships, Zephyrian military cruisers, hegemony dreadnoughts, and several ships of unknown configuration. "Word has leaked out about our discovery," Captain Reeves explained. "Someone monitored our communications and sold the information.
Now every major power in the sector is sending ships to investigate."
Marcus studied the tactical display with growing concern. Some of the approaching vessels were flying diplomatic flags, but others were clearly military expeditions. The hegemony ships in particular were notorious for their aggressive acquisition policies regarding alien technology. "How long before the first ships arrive?" he asked.
"The closest vessels will be here in 6 hours," Dr. Yamamoto replied. "The hegemony fleet will arrive about 2 hours after that."
Kalthara moved through the holographic display, studying the approaching ships with an expression that might have been curiosity or concern. "The patterns repeat themselves," he observed.
When the Caliph discovered technologies left by their predecessors, the same conflicts arose. Competition, fear, the desire to control what should be shared. Can the Kithara defend itself? Captain Reeves asked bluntly. The keeper's multifaceted eyes seemed to shimmer.
The ship was designed as a guardian, not a conqueror. Its weapons are formidable, but they are meant to protect, not to attack. And, more importantly, they require full consciousness integration to function properly. Marcus felt a chill of understanding.
"You're saying the ship isn't fully awake yet?"
"The basic systems are functional: life support, propulsion, sensors. But the higher-order functions, including the defensive arrays, require complete neural integration between the ship's consciousness and its operator."
"That process is still ongoing." How much longer do we need?" Marcus asked.
Kalthara was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable.
For full integration? Perhaps days. For basic defensive capability? Perhaps hours, if you are willing to accept certain risks. What kind of risks? Accelerated neural integration can cause permanent changes to your consciousness, Marcus Chen. You would become something more than human, but also something less. The boundary between your mind and the ship's mind would blur. You would gain abilities beyond imagining, but you would also lose the certainty of singular identity. Marcus looked around at the holographic display showing the approaching ships. Among them he could see the distinctive signatures of hegemony vessels, ships belonging to a militaristic alliance that had built their power through the acquisition and weaponization of alien technologies. If they gained control of the Kythera, they would use its knowledge not to advance civilization, but to dominate it. What happens if the hegemony gets their hands on this ship? He asked. Kythera's expression became grim. They would attempt to extract the knowledge by force, caring nothing for the wisdom or context that should accompany it. Technologies that took the Caliph millennia to develop responsibly would be unleashed without understanding or restraint. The results would be catastrophic. Dr. Yamamoto stepped forward. There has to be another option. What if we transmitted the ship's location to Earth Command and requested protection under archaeological preservation laws? Captain Reeves shook her head. The nearest Earth fleet is days away, and the archaeological protection treaties only apply to dead artifacts. If the ship is functional, it falls under salvage law, which means whoever gets here first with sufficient force can claim it. Marcus closed his eyes and reached out with the enhanced senses he had developed during his integration with the ship's systems. He could feel the Kythera's vast consciousness stirring around him, patient and ancient and incredibly powerful. But he could also sense its vulnerability, like a sleeping giant slowly awakening, still groggy and uncertain. The choice is yours, Marcus Chen. Kythera said quietly. I cannot make this decision for you. But know that whatever you choose, the consequences will reach far beyond your own life. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at the tactical display again. The approaching ships were closer now, their energy signatures growing stronger with each passing minute. In a few hours, this peaceful star system would become a battlefield, with the Kythera as the prize. But, as he studied the display more carefully, Marcus noticed something the others had missed. Among the approaching vessels were several ships flying the colors of the Galactic Archaeological Consortium, an independent organization dedicated to preserving and studying ancient technologies. If those ships could be convinced to support their position. Kythera, does the ship have the ability to communicate across multiple frequencies simultaneously? Of course. The Kythera's communication systems are far more advanced than anything your current technology can produce. Then, I have an idea. Instead of hiding from the approaching fleets, what if we talked to them? What if we showed them what the ship really is, not a weapon to be claimed, but a library to be shared? Captain Reeves looked skeptical. You think you can convince a hegemony battle fleet to turn around with a strongly worded message? Not the hegemony, no. But there are other ships out there, scientists, explorers, archaeologists. People who understand the difference between knowledge and power. If we can get them to take our side. Kythera moved closer, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with what might have been excitement. You proposed to awaken not just the ship, but the conscience of those who would claim it. An interesting approach. The Caliph would approve. It's worth a try, Dr. Yamamoto agreed. And if it doesn't work, we can always fall back on more direct measures. Marcus nodded, then turned to Kythera. Can you help me compose a message that will explain what this ship really represents? Something that will make the scientific community understand what's at stake here? I can do better than that, the keeper replied. I can help you show them. The ancient alien moved to what appeared to be the bridge's primary control interface, a crystalline structure that rose from the deck like a tree made of light. As his hands touched its surface, the holographic display around them shifted and changed, becoming something far more complex and beautiful than a simple tactical readout. Suddenly, Marcus and the others found themselves standing in a recreation of an ancient Caliph city. Towers of living crystal reached toward alien skies, while beings of impossible grace moved through gardens where the plants themselves seemed to sing with harmonious frequencies.
It was a civilization at its peak, advanced, peaceful, and utterly magnificent. This is what knowledge can build when it is used wisely. Kalthara's voice echoed through the simulation. Not weapons or empires, but beauty and harmony and understanding. This is what the Kithara offers to any species mature enough to receive it. The scene shifted, showing the same city in ruins, its towers broken and its gardens withered. And this is what happens when wisdom fails to keep pace with power. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes as he watched the destruction of something so beautiful. But, more than that, he felt determination. This was why the Kithara had been hidden for so long, waiting for the right moment and the right people to rediscover it. Send that message to every ship in the system, he said. Let them see what's really at stake here. As Kalthara began broadcasting the Kalith historical records to the approaching fleets, Marcus made his own decision. Whether or not the other ships chose to support them, the Kithara needed to be ready to defend itself. And that meant completing the integration process, regardless of the personal cost. He moved to the central control interface and placed his hands on its crystalline surface. Immediately, he felt the ship's consciousness reaching out to him, vast and ancient and incredibly alien, but also strangely welcoming. Are you certain? Kalthara asked, sensing Marcus's decision. Once the process is complete, there is no returning to what you were before. Marcus smiled, feeling more certain than he had ever felt about anything in his life. I've spent my whole career bringing dead things back to life. I'm not going to stop now. As his consciousness merged more deeply with the Kithara's vast intelligence, Marcus felt himself becoming something new, not just human, not just machine, but a bridge between worlds and a guardian of ancient wisdom. And, in the distance, he could sense the approaching ships beginning to slow as their crews absorbed the incredible message that was being broadcast from the awakening dreadnought. The transformation was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined. As his consciousness merged with the Kithara's vast intelligence, he felt his perception expanding beyond the boundaries of his physical body. Suddenly, he was aware of every system aboard the ancient vessel, the quantum fluctuations in the power core, the data flows through the neural networks, the delicate balance of forces that kept the ship's impossible technologies functioning. But it wasn't just technical awareness. The ship had memories, experiences that stretched back across 3 millennia of existence. Marcus found himself experiencing fragments of the Kithara's past, battles fought in defense of peaceful worlds, diplomatic missions to forge alliances between species, scientific expeditions to explore the mysteries of creation itself. Through it all, Kalthara's presence served as an anchor, guiding Marcus through the integration process and helping him maintain his sense of self even as his consciousness expanded to encompass the ship's vast intelligence. Do not lose yourself in the flow, the keeper advised as waves of alien memory washed over Marcus's mind. You are the bridge between human and Kalith understanding. Both perspectives must remain intact. Marcus struggled to maintain his identity as the ship's consciousness pressed against his own. It wasn't malevolent, quite the opposite. The Kithara's intelligence was vast and benevolent, filled with curiosity and compassion and an almost parental concern for the younger species it had been designed to guide. But it was also overwhelming, like trying to hold an ocean in a teacup. Gradually, however, Marcus began to find his balance. Instead of fighting the alien consciousness, he learned to work with it, creating a partnership that preserved both his human perspective and the ship's ancient wisdom. When the integration finally stabilized, he opened his eyes to find that his perception of reality had changed fundamentally. The bridge of the Kithara was no longer just a collection of control systems and display screens. Now he could see the ship's consciousness as a living presence, its thoughts flowing through quantum pathways that resembled a vast neural network. More importantly, he could feel the ship's emotions, its joy at finally awakening, its concern for the approaching fleet, and its determination to fulfill the mission for which it had been created. How do you feel? Dr. Yamamoto asked, her medical scanner already active and recording his vital signs. Marcus considered the question carefully. Different. Still human, but more. I can feel the ship's thoughts, its memories, its purpose. It's like having a conversation with the galaxy's wisest teacher. Captain Reeves stepped forward, her expression concerned. Can you still operate independently? Are you still you? I'm still me, Marcus assured her, though he could sense that the definition of me had expanded considerably. But, I'm also connected to something much larger than myself. The ship isn't just a machine anymore, it's a partner, a collaborator, a friend.
Kael'thara nodded approvingly. You have achieved the harmony my people valued most highly.
Few beings are capable of such integration without losing themselves completely. Through the ship's enhanced sensors, Marcus could perceive the approaching fleet with perfect clarity. The vessels had arranged themselves in rough formation around the Kythera's position, but none had moved to within weapons range. More encouragingly, several ships were broadcasting diplomatic signals, requesting permission to open communications. The messages having an effect, Dr. Yamamoto observed, monitoring the communication frequencies. I'm receiving requests for dialogue from the archaeological consortium ships, 3 of the human exploration vessels, and even some of the Zephyrian cruisers. Marcus reached out with the ship's communication systems, feeling the Kythera's vast transmission arrays coming online like the awakening of a sleeping giant. When he spoke, his words were carried across space with power and clarity that made conventional radio transmission seem like whispers. This is Marcus Chen, speaking for the vessel Kythera and its keeper, Kael'thara.
We welcome all peaceful visitors who come seeking knowledge rather than conquest. The responses came almost immediately.
Dr. Sarah Martinez of the Archaeological Consortium Vessel Discovery was the first to reply, her voice crackling with excitement and scientific curiosity.
Mr. Chen, this is Dr. Martinez aboard the research vessel Discovery.
The historical records you've transmitted are extraordinary.
Is it true that the ship contains the complete archives of the Caliph civilization?
Before Marcus could respond, another voice cut across the communication channel, harsher and more demanding than the first.
This is Admiral Voss of the Hegemony Vessel Dominator. You are illegally occupying a derelict vessel in neutral space.
Prepare for immediate boarding and inspection under the authority of the Galactic Salvage Accords.
Marcus felt the Kythera's consciousness bristle at the Admiral's tone.
Through the ship's sensors, he could perceive the massive Hegemony dreadnought moving closer, its weapons systems powering up with obvious hostile intent.
But, rather than responding with matching aggression, Marcus chose a different approach.
Admiral Voss, he replied calmly, the vessel Kythera is not a derelict. It is a living ship with an active crew, and it operates under the protection of its original sovereign authority.
However, we are prepared to share the knowledge it contains with any civilization mature enough to use it responsibly. Sovereignty claims by extinct civilizations carry no legal weight, Admiral Voss shot back. You have 1 hour to abandon the vessel before we take it by force.
Through his connection to the ship's consciousness, Marcus could sense a stirring of something that might have been anger. The Kythera had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations across 3 millennia, and it had developed strong opinions about the difference between wisdom and mere power. The Admiral's words echo those of the destroyers who brought down my people. Kael'thara observed grimly. Some patterns persist across the centuries, but before the situation could escalate further, a new voice joined the communication net, one that carried the authority of age and experience.
This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth Alliance vessel Horizon. Admiral Voss, I'm invoking Article 7 of the Interspecies Archaeological Protection Treaty. This site is now under Earth Alliance protection pending a full scientific investigation. Marcus felt a surge of relief as he recognized the name.
Captain Vasquez was a legend in the Earth Fleet, famous for her diplomatic skills and her dedication to peaceful exploration.
If anyone could defuse this situation, it would be her. Admiral Voss's response was predictably hostile.
The Earth Alliance has no authority in this sector, Vasquez.
Stand down or be considered in violation of hegemony territorial claims.
The only claims I recognize here are those of scientific discovery and interspecies cooperation, Captain Vasquez replied coolly. And I noticed that several consortium vessels share my position. Indeed, the archaeological consortium ships were moving into formation around the horizon, their combined presence creating a protective barrier between the Kythera and the more aggressively positioned hegemony vessels. Even some of the smaller exploration ships were joining the defensive formation, apparently convinced by the historical records that the ancient vessel represented something too important to be claimed by any single power. Marcus realized that this was a crucial moment, not just for the Kythera, but for the future of galactic civilization. The choice between cooperation and conquest, between wisdom and power, was being made in real time by the crews of the ships surrounding them. Dr. Martinez, Captain Vasquez, he said, opening a secure communication channel to the Allied vessels.
I believe it's time to demonstrate what the Kythera truly represents.
With your permission, I'd like to invite representatives from your ships to come aboard and witness the ship's awakening for themselves.
Dr. Martinez's enthusiasm was immediate and obvious. We accept your invitation. This is the archaeological discovery of the millennium.
Captain Vasquez was more cautious but equally interested.
What guarantees can you offer for the safety of our people?
Marcus consulted with Kythera through their shared consciousness. The keeper's response was immediate and reassuring. Tell them that guests aboard the Kythera are under the protection of laws older than their civilizations, Kythera said. No harm will come to those who approach with peaceful intentions. As Marcus relayed this message, he became aware that the ship was preparing for visitors in ways both subtle and profound.
Throughout the vessel, systems that had been dormant for millennia were coming online.
Guest quarters were being prepared, environmental systems were adjusting to accommodate multiple species, and, most remarkably, the ship's vast library systems were organizing themselves to present information in formats that various species could understand. But, the Kythera was also preparing for the possibility of conflict. Through his merged consciousness, Marcus could feel the ship's defensive systems awakening, not with the harsh mechanical precision of human weapons, but with the fluid grace of technologies that treated warfare as a regrettable necessity rather than a glorious enterprise.
Admiral Voss apparently sensed the change as well.
His next transmission carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been present before.
What are those energy readings I'm detecting? Are you powering weapons systems?
Marcus consulted with the ship's consciousness before responding. The Kythera's defensive arrays were indeed coming online, but they operated according to principles that the Admiral's sensors couldn't properly interpret. Admiral, the ship is awakening systems that have been dormant for 3,000 years. These are not weapons in the conventional sense, but rather protective measures designed to ensure that the knowledge contained within this vessel is used for its intended purpose. And what purpose is that? Demanded the Admiral. It was Kythera who answered, his mental voice somehow reaching every ship in the system simultaneously, a demonstration of communication technology that left conventional radio systems seeming primitive by comparison. The purpose for which all knowledge should be used, to elevate civilization rather than destroy it, to build understanding rather than enforce dominance, to heal the wounds left by war rather than create new ones. The ancient keeper's words seemed to resonate across space, carrying with them not just meaning but emotional resonance that touched something deep in the consciousness of every sentient being who heard them. Through the ship's sensors, Marcus could perceive the responses of the various crews, wonder from the scientists, uncertainty from the military officers, and something approaching awe from the more philosophical species represented in the fleet. But Admiral Voss remained unmoved. Pretty words won't change the legal reality. This vessel is salvage, and the hegemony claims it by right of superior force. The hegemony dreadnought began moving forward, its massive bulk dwarfing even the Kythera's impressive dimensions. Through the ship's consciousness, Marcus could feel weapons systems targeting the ancient vessel, preparing to disable its defenses and force surrender. It was then that the Kythera made a choice that surprised even Marcus. Instead of powering up its own weapons or raising defensive shields, the ship did something completely unexpected. It began to sing. The sound started as a low harmonic vibration that seemed to emanate from the ship's hull itself. But, as it grew stronger, it became something more complex and beautiful, a melody that spoke of ancient sorrows and eternal hopes, of civilizations that had risen and fallen, of the endless cycle of growth and renewal that drove the universe itself. The song touched every ship in the system, resonating through their hulls and reaching directly into the consciousness of their crews. But, more than that, it carried information, memories of the Kalith civilization at its height, visions of what could be achieved when technology was guided by wisdom rather than ambition, and warnings about the consequences of choosing power over understanding. Through his connection to the ship, Marcus could perceive the effect the song was having on the assembled fleet. Crew members throughout the system were experiencing the same revelation he had felt when first touching the Kalith control interface, a glimpse of what civilization could become when it embraced cooperation over competition. Even Admiral Voss seemed affected, his next transmission carrying a note of uncertainty that hadn't been present before. What is that signal? How is it bypassing our communication filters? Marcus smiled, feeling the ship's ancient consciousness flowing around him like a warm tide.
It's not a signal, Admiral. It's a gift. The Kithara is showing you what it showed me, a vision of what we could become if we choose wisdom over warfare.
The song continued, growing stronger and more beautiful with each passing moment. And, throughout the assembled fleet, Marcus could sense minds changing, perspectives shifting, and the first tentative steps toward the kind of cooperation that the Caliph had always dreamed possible. The transformation of the assembled fleet was nothing short of miraculous. As the Kithara song continued to resonate through space, reaching into the consciousness of every sentient being within range, Marcus watched through the ship's sensors as weapons were powered down, aggressive formations dissolved, and the hostile energy that had filled the system began to dissipate.
Even Admiral Voss seemed affected, though he fought against the influence with typical military stubbornness.
His transmissions became less frequent and more uncertain, as if he was struggling with thoughts and emotions that didn't fit his worldview. Dr. Martinez was among the first to respond to the changing atmosphere. "This is incredible," her voice crackled across the communication channels.
"I'm receiving data streams that seem to be reorganizing themselves based on our scientific frameworks.
It's like the ship is teaching us how to understand its knowledge."
Captain Vasquez's response was more measured but equally impressed. "I've never experienced anything like this. It's as if the ship is communicating on levels we didn't even know existed."
Through his merged consciousness with the Kithara, Marcus could perceive what was happening with perfect clarity. The ship wasn't just broadcasting information, it was establishing a kind of empathic network that allowed different species to share understanding across the barriers of language and culture. The technology was beyond anything current galactic civilization possessed, but its purpose was beautifully simple: to make cooperation not just possible, but inevitable. Kael'thara moved to stand beside Marcus at the central control interface, his ancient features reflecting something that might have been satisfaction. "This is how it was meant to be," the keeper observed.
"Knowledge shared freely, understanding passed from species to species, wisdom growing through cooperation rather than competition. Will it last?"
Marcus asked, both aloud and through their mental connection. "That depends on the choices made by those who receive the gift. The song can open minds, but it cannot force them to remain open. Each species, each individual, must choose for themselves whether to embrace cooperation or return to the old ways of conflict." As if to test this observation, Admiral Voss's voice cut across the communication network, though it carried none of its former aggression.
I don't understand what's happening here. My crew is reporting experiences that don't match any known psychological phenomena. Some of my officers are claiming to see visions of civilizations that existed before recorded history."
Marcus reached out through the ship's communication systems, his voice carrying the gentle authority he had developed since merging with the Kithara's consciousness. "Admiral, what you're experiencing is the true history of our galaxy, not the sanitized versions found in official records, but the complete story of how civilizations rise and fall, how knowledge is gained and lost, and how the same mistakes get repeated across the centuries."
"But why show us this?
What's the purpose?" It was Kael'thara who answered, his mental voice reaching every consciousness in the assembled fleet. "Because your species, all of your species, stand at the same crossroads where my people once stood. You have developed technologies that could transform your civilizations into something magnificent, but you still think in terms of dominance and submission rather than cooperation and mutual growth." Through the ship's sensors, Marcus could perceive the hegemony vessels beginning to move into more peaceful formations. Whatever the crews were experiencing, it was having a profound effect on their attitudes toward the situation. Dr. Martinez's scientific excitement was palpable as she transmitted again.
"The historical records we're receiving indicate that this scenario has played out multiple times across galactic history.
Advanced civilizations develop powerful technologies, use them for warfare rather than advancement, and ultimately destroy themselves. The Kithara and ships like it were built to break that cycle."
"How?" asked Captain Vasquez.
Marcus felt the ship's consciousness flow around him as he formulated his response. "By serving as teachers rather than weapons. The Kithara contains not just the technological knowledge of the Caliph civilization, but the wisdom they gained through millions of years of experience. It's designed to share that wisdom with species that are ready to receive it."
"And what determines readiness?"
This question came from Admiral Voss, whose voice had lost all trace of its former hostility. Readiness is demonstrated through the choices made when wisdom is offered, Kalthara replied. A species that seeks to hoard knowledge for advantage over others is not ready. A species that recognizes knowledge as a gift to be shared freely with all, such a species can be trusted with the deeper mysteries, as if to demonstrate this principle, the ship began opening new communication channels to each vessel in the fleet. But, rather than simply broadcasting information, it was creating interactive learning environments where representatives from different species could collaborate on understanding the vast archives contained within the Kythera's memory banks. Marcus watched with growing amazement as scientists from a dozen different civilizations began working together on projects that would have taken any single species decades to complete alone. The ship's consciousness was facilitating these collaborations, serving as a translator not just of language but of fundamental concepts and ways of thinking.
"This is extraordinary," Dr. Martinez reported.
"We're making breakthrough discoveries in quantum mechanics, xenobiology, and stellar engineering just by combining our different perspectives with the Kalith knowledge base." But the most remarkable change was occurring aboard the hegemony vessels. Through the empathic network the ship had established, Marcus could sense a fundamental shift in the consciousness of Admiral Voss and his crews. The aggressive certainty that had driven their expansion across the galaxy was being replaced by something approaching humility. "I need to speak with my superiors," Admiral Voss finally transmitted.
"What we've experienced here, it changes everything. The Hegemony Council needs to understand what this ship represents." "That is wisdom," Kalthara observed approvingly.
To recognize when one's understanding must be revised in the face of new knowledge. Over the next several hours, representatives from the various ships began coming aboard the Kythera to experience the ship's awakening firsthand. Marcus found himself serving as a guide and interpreter, helping visitors understand not just the ship's technology but its purpose and philosophy. Dr. Martinez was among the first to arrive, her eyes wide with wonder as she explored the ship's vast libraries and research laboratories.
"The knowledge contained here could advance galactic civilization by millennia," she breathed.
Medical technologies that could eliminate disease, energy systems that could power entire star systems without environmental damage, communication methods that could unite species across the galaxy.
"All of that and more," Marcus agreed.
"But the ship's greatest gift isn't its technology, it's its wisdom. The understanding of how to use advanced capabilities without destroying ourselves in the process." Captain Vasquez, when she arrived several hours later, was more interested in the strategic implications of the discovery. If this knowledge is shared freely among all species, it could end the conflicts that have plagued our galaxy for centuries. But it could also upset the current balance of power. Some civilizations won't be happy about losing their technological advantages. Marcus nodded, having considered the same issues during his integration with the ship's consciousness.
"That's why the awakening had to happen this way.
If any single species had gained exclusive access to the Kythera, they would have used its knowledge to dominate others.
But if everyone has access to the same information, then cooperation becomes more profitable than conflict," Captain Vasquez finished.
"Brilliant."
Even Admiral Voss, when he finally came aboard, seemed transformed by his experience with the ship's empathic network.
The aggressive certainty that had characterized his earlier transmissions had been replaced by thoughtful consideration. "I've spent my entire career believing that strength came from superior firepower," he admitted as Marcus showed him through the ship's defensive systems. "But these weapons, they're designed not to destroy enemies but to protect allies.
The entire philosophy is different."
The Caliph learned that true strength comes from the ability to create rather than destroy, Marcus explained. Their weapons were tools of last resort, used only when peaceful solutions had been exhausted. As the days passed and more representatives from the assembled fleet came aboard the Kythera, Marcus began to see the formation of something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly cooperative alliance between species based on shared knowledge rather than mutual fear. The ship's consciousness seemed to approve of these developments, its vast intelligence focusing on facilitating communication and understanding between the various species represented in the fleet. Through his merged awareness, Marcus could perceive the gradual formation of what could only be called a collective consciousness, not a hive mind that suppressed individual identity, but a network of cooperation that enhanced the capabilities of all participants.
Kael'thara spent these days preparing for what he called the final awakening, the moment when the ship's full capabilities would be unlocked and its true mission could begin. But he also made it clear that this step could only be taken with the consent and cooperation of all the species involved. The Kithara was designed to serve as a bridge between civilizations, the ancient keeper explained as he and Marcus worked together in the ship's core chamber. But it cannot fulfill that purpose without the active participation of those it seeks to serve. What exactly does the final awakening involve? Marcus asked. The ship will become fully integrated into the galactic communication network, serving as a hub for the free exchange of knowledge and wisdom between all species. Its libraries will be accessible to anyone who approaches with peaceful intent, its technologies will be shared with civilizations ready to use them responsibly, and its consciousness will serve as a mediator for disputes between species. Marcus felt a thrill of anticipation as he contemplated the implications. You're talking about creating a new kind of galactic civilization, one based on cooperation rather than competition. That was always the dream of my people. They were simply ahead of their time. But now, perhaps, the galaxy is ready. The final awakening took place 3 days later, with representatives from 12 different species gathered aboard the Kithara to witness the event. As Marcus placed his hands on the ship's central control interface for the last time as a partially integrated consciousness, he felt the ancient vessel's vast intelligence preparing to expand beyond the boundaries of its hull and into the greater galactic community. The process was unlike anything he had experienced before. Instead of merging with a single consciousness, Marcus found himself connected to a network that encompassed not just the ship but every sentient being who had chosen to participate in the awakening. For a moment that lasted an eternity, he could perceive the galaxy from the perspective of dozens of different species, understanding their hopes and fears, their achievements and failures, their dreams for the future. When the awakening was complete, Marcus opened his eyes to find that the universe had fundamentally changed. The Kithara was no longer just a ship but a beacon of cooperation that could be accessed by any civilization ready to embrace the principles of shared knowledge and mutual respect. Through the vast network now connecting species across the galaxy, Marcus could perceive the beginning of a new age. Research projects that would have taken centuries could now be completed in years through interspecies collaboration. Conflicts that might have led to war could be resolved through the mediation of the ship's ancient wisdom. And, most importantly, the knowledge that had been lost when civilizations fell could now be preserved and shared for the benefit of all. As he stood on the bridge of the awakened vessel, surrounded by representatives from across the galaxy, Marcus felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that he had helped fulfill a dream that was 3,000 years in the making. The Kithara was alive again, not as a weapon of war but as an instrument of peace, carrying the hopes and dreams of the Caliph into a future where their vision of galactic cooperation might finally be realized. And, in the depths of space, other ancient vessels began to stir, their own consciousness networks awakening to join the growing alliance of species committed to wisdom over warfare, cooperation over conquest, and the preservation of knowledge for the benefit of all sentient life. The Age of the Guardians had begun.